So just to start off, kind of like for those of, don't know Superhuman, you want to give a brief sort of story about what it is and, how it works and kind of where it came from.
For sure. So for folks that don't know, Superhuman is the most productive email app ever made. Most of our customers get through their inbox about twice as fast as before. They reply to their important messages sooner, and they save 4 hours or more every single week. We're also reinventing the future of productivity with AI. Imagine waking up to an inbox where every single email already had a draft reply. You would just edit and then send, and sometimes you wouldn't even need to edit.
I mean, that's amazing. So let's talk about your own story. What inspired you to start it? What was sort of the, this obvious need, but kind of what was the reasons that this is the way to solve it?
The need in retrospect seems obvious, but it wasn't obvious at the time. The method I used was actually to find the biggest possible problem that I could solve. And it really hit me after I sold my last company to LinkedIn. Email is a way bigger problem than most people realize. LinkedIn is based, or was based, in Mountain View, and I was working in San Francisco. For those who haven't had the dubious pleasure of that particular commute, it usually takes about an hour up the 101. It's not particularly pleasant. And this was in 2014. So Uber and Lyft were having their heyday. I happened to be in the back of a Lyft. And on this single car ride, I cleared out my email. I checked my calendar for the next day. I called a restaurant in San Francisco. I made a reservation to have dinner with my partner that evening. I even called my mother. So on this one car ride, I was simultaneously being a productive employee, a proactive partner, and a present son. And I realized that the magic of Uber, the magic of Lyft, was not about transportation. It was not about getting from A to B, but it was about time, getting the time back to do all of these things. So I started to ask the question, where do we spend all of our time? And it turns out there are 1 billion professionals in the world, and on average, we spend 3 hours a day reading and writing email. So it's not complex maths, that's 3 billion hours every single day that go into email, or more than north of 1 trillion hours every single year that go into reading and writing email. In fact, we all collectively spend more time in email than we do in any other app. Which again, is maybe obvious if you sit down and think about it, but it definitely wasn't at the start. So we set out to build the most productive email app we could.
And it's fantastic. So you've been on this journey for about 10 years, right? And you started sort of doing AI work when it was still properly hard, right? Like you were on the frontier of it. That's before LLMs existed. How do you continue to see that history? But now in the world of LLMs, how do you see it as afford you a competitive advantage?
Back when we were doing AI, it was so long ago that LLMs were yet to be conceived, and that the technologies were so different. I think we put ourselves in the right place at the right time, partially by luck, partially by choice. On the one hand, we were lucky that email and the related fields of contacts, tasks, and calendar are very amenable to AI. They're very amenable in particular to working with LLMs. And on the other hand, we just simply had a vision for what we wanted to build. If you were to go back to our pre-seed and our seed decks back from 2014 and 2015, you would see that we had the vision for substantially the same features that we are still building out today over a decade later. And we were just waiting for the technology to catch up. And there was a particular point in time, I think it was 2022, late that year, where it became obvious that the way that we were going to build software was going to change, perhaps overnight. So I started to move all of my operational responsibilities to other people on my team. By early 2023, I'd entirely cleared out my calendar, and this was before founder mode, but I went full founder mode on AI.
You were ahead of the curve consistently.
That's the plan. And I just went literally full-time over full time on figuring out what this new wave of AI is and how we were going to do it. So we partnered with OpenAI, we built our first few flagship features, and then we enjoyed this crazy year of AI-fueled growth, which has continued to this day. And then in early 2024, we started to get some recognition and emerge as a category-leading product in our space. For example, US News picked us as the best AI-powered email app. So in the space of just a little over a year, we went from not that much what we would call AI today in the product, but lots of vision and lots of ambition, to what's now a category-leading app in the space.
I think if I think about really successful companies, your point around the pitch deck and your seed deck still sort of carrying through, there's like a first principles approach that somehow it's like independent of the technology, where things are, like they've been able to sort of carry through. And I think for the founders out there and sort of leaders out there, what makes you kind of see that you got that sort of first principles approach, yet it's still, that it still holds true even a decade later?
I think it's knowing just enough to be dangerous, but then also simultaneously relaxing the constraints of what you know technology can do. So I was a programmer growing up. I started programming when I was 8 years old. I started a PhD in machine learning at the University of Cambridge, but I dropped out like a year in. I was really, really bad at it. And this was back in 2006. Nothing worked. But it gave me enough knowledge to be able to imagine what AI ought to be able to do, let's say on the time frame of 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And so when we were doing our fundraising decks, it was mostly full of, wouldn't it be amazing if this? And then I'd mock up a piece of user interface, and I could talk coherently and intelligently to it. And that was really the trick. I wasn't saying, we know how to build this. What I was really saying was, this will be buildable, and when it's buildable, we'll be ready.
I think that, so when I work with folks trying to think about vision and strategy, I think it's the exact same things. Like, what is a tractable versus intractable problem? And then how do I relax the constraints to say, this will be possible? So along those lines, now in the new world, what are the features that you built that you think that were enabled through LLMs, and how have they differentiated?
The first one that we built was Write with AI. This is now something that I think we all take for granted in pretty much every product that we use. You write down a few notes or the basic idea of your email, and we turn it into a fully written email. But unlike Copilot, unlike Gemini, unlike every other email app, we match the voice and tone and the style in the emails you've already sent. So the emails do actually genuinely sound like you do. We even tailor it to the specific people that you're emailing. And this is a good example of, we just didn't know how much people would use this, and how much people use it really blows me away, even to this day. Our average user uses Write with AI 37 times per week, which is still kind of mind-blowing for me. And if you look over the course of 2024, the percentage of emails that were written with AI in Superhuman has increased 5-fold over just the last year. So I think we're still very much in the space of, I hate to say this because generally it's not true, but there's an element of build it and they will come. Or in other words, have a product, you're going to solve distribution by other means, you can solve it with AI, but build the products that you believe people will use, and assuming you've built the right thing, they'll start to use it increasingly over time. So that was Write with AI. We then followed that up with things like auto-summarize, instant reply, and Ask AI. And Ask AI is particularly fascinating. For years, we've had to rely on what we hilariously call search. But email is a treasure trove of critical information. Think of project statuses, deal communication, customer communication. In our personal lives, every single thing we've ordered and shipped and have received, really it's all logged in email. But when we rely on search, we have to remember senders, guess keywords, scan subject lines. What if you could just ask, or when is the Q3 offsite? What are my flight details back home? Or what if you could take complex work that might normally take you half an hour to an hour and get it done in seconds? And that's what we've built with Ask AI. This works today. It's kind of amazing. So a real example, every single time we launch a product, those who are customers of Superhuman will know this, I send an email to the customer base. And we get emails back. We usually get in the region of 2,000 to 4,000 emails back, depending on what it is that we just launched. I actually read every single one. And I go through my inbox, and I have a Google Doc open at the same time. I copy and paste the best quotes from the emails into the doc so I can present them to the company in an all hands. I can use them in an investor update email, that kind of thing. Typically, that work takes me about 30 to 40 minutes to read through 2,000 to 4,000 emails. And that's if I've had my coffee. I mean, I can take a lot longer than that as well. It depends how motivated I'm feeling. But with Ask AI, you can simply ask, find me the top 10 most positive customer responses to the last feature launch. And bang, 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 and you have the answer. So Sam at OpenAI often talks about how we can take tasks that would previously take half an hour, a few hours, and condense them down into just a few seconds. And I think that's what we're beginning to see. Most recently, the biggest evolution yet in Superhuman actually has been with features like auto reminders and auto drafts. So let's say you're sending a critical email. Let's say you're trying to close a deal. What would you do? Well, if you're using Superhuman, you would set a reminder. But think about how manual that is. You still have to remember to set the reminder. You still have to decide when to set the reminder for, notice when it came back, and then manually write the follow-up email. But Superhuman now does all of that automatically for you. When you're writing an email that needs a follow-up, it will set a reminder. And when the email comes back, it will write the follow-up email for you.
A few things that sort of resonated with me. First was on the sort of auto response. You know, the fact that I think the nuance of being able to keep voice, keep style, remember who you are communicating with in a world where that's what differentiates. That is what makes the difference between a good product and a great product. And sort of similarly, the idea of condensing time or removing labor, it's just the cognitive load, right? Especially with email, which is so interrupt-based. So there's no shortage of amazing ideas, and I'm sure in those 2,000, probably a few little gems in there. How do you prioritize? How do you decide what to do, what not to do? And I think we were having a little bit of a conversation before. There are certain tasks that Gen AI LLMs are good at, and there are certain that they are not yet good at. How do you factor that into what you build?
And then on top of that, we're also still learning. So however we prioritize, we have to do it in a way where it's kind of matching our growing competency over time. So in general, this is a very complicated topic. How do you prioritize a startup or a company or a product roadmap? And for most startups, we're on our way to product market fit, and even once you quote unquote get there, you're never really actually there. You can lose it over time. You have to constantly work at it. Whether you're a Deel or a Superhuman, you're constantly expanding, and so if you're lucky, then your product market fit will keep rolling. But if you're a normal company, it's a new type of audience, and you have to keep on figuring it out. And this is something that I've spoken about and written up at length. If you haven't come across it, Google Superhuman, our product market fit engine. And there's a pretty robust algorithm you can follow that will numerically take you to product market fit. You can actually measure and optimize your way there. Taking the specific lens of AI, which I think was unique because certainly for us and for many companies, we just didn't have built-in expertise on how to do this. We came up with the following three-phase evolution, and this was designed to help us ship fast, which is what you need to do to win, and also learn over time, learn from our customers and then build our AI muscle, so to speak. And phase one of AI, we saw, were on-demand features. So these are features that you have to remember to use. And then the example from Superhuman would be right with AI. These are features that are there when you want them, and are out of the way when you don't. They're generally easier to build, and they don't require large amounts of infrastructure, they don't require large amounts of money to run. They're a good way to get started. You can ship them quickly. Then phase two for us were always-on features. These were features that you don't have to remember to use. And examples from Superhuman would be auto-summarize, instant reply, auto-reminders, auto-drafts. They're just always working all the time. Now, these are much harder to build. They generally require very large amounts of infrastructure. They cost a lot of money to run. We've processed many billions of emails through those features during their existence at Superhuman. And so you have to be a bit more sure and a bit more confident and a bit more capable before you take something like that on. And then the phase we're in right now is agentic AI. So we're building agents that replace entire parts of your workflow end to end. So you can imagine an email agent that triages your inbox, that schedules on your behalf, that writes, maybe even sends fully written emails on your behalf. And you can imagine giving that agent a relatively complex problem, and it will break it down into tasks and subtasks. And then as it can, it will execute those tasks in serial or in parallel. It can ask you clarifying questions, resolve ambiguity, go to the web, query other systems, even query other agents. That's the kind of thing we're building now. And we think that that kind of an agent would free us all up to be more creative, more strategic, and more impactful.
I was talking with someone at Coinbase. They're actually, your agents are now able to do commerce on your behalf using micropayments, not through crypto. When you talk about those three stages, I think it was really fascinating, because I think the first, in terms of a user's willingness to trust, to adopt, and to be tolerant of when it goes wrong. And I think there's a natural evolution, right? I was coming home from dinner last night, hit the Uber, I got a Waymo. I'm in San Francisco, we take Waymos all the time. But the first time is that this Waymo had to take a 3-point turn at the end of a blocked driveway. I was actually properly this is not going to go well. But it did it.
How many points was it?
Oh, it was more than 3, less than 7. Which I was like, okay, great. Which is definitely, a mediocre driver, right? But I think to the conversation here, it's the amount of trust that you would have. If my Uber driver that was a human did that same 7-point turn, I'd be like, all right, you're a clown, but fine. When Waymo did it, I'm like, I'm going to die. It was a little better than that. But how do you see that sort of as you migrate people from those 3 stages, getting them to have that trust and when it goes wrong, being able to sort of make sure that they understand that and are accepting?
We were just having this conversation yesterday at Superhuman, and one of the things I noted was, so we're working on a calendar feature right now. We're building up the calendar inside of Superhuman. If you use the product, you'll see it. There's basically almost a fully baked calendar in there. And we're doing the last, what I would consider table stakes piece, which is editing an event. It's not that exciting, but if you use calendar all the time, it's necessary. And the following observation came to us, which is the more mundane the feature you're building, for it to be exciting, the more polished or interesting or novel the interactions have to be. So in the case of editing a calendar event, we found a way to make it fun and fast and differentiated. In Google or Google Calendar and Outlook, you have to literally go to the event, click edit, and it's quite slow. Whereas we found a way to do, in HCI terms, what you would call direct manipulation inside of Superhuman. But on the flip side, if you're building something like an agent, the user expectation for what that is so much lower that you can probably release something that only works 80-90% of the time. And depending on the stakes of the task, you'll still find that people are excited, they're interested to use it, and tolerant of its faults. So there's this sliding scale that for each new feature we're building now at Superhuman, where we decide where it is on that scale. And that kind of determines the level of polish that we think it needs and how differentiated the non-AI aspects of the feature need to be. So that's been very top of mind for us. And then the other thing is how integrated or how automated are the features? So if you go back to the previous question and think of phases 1 and 2, phase 1 was you have to remember to use it. Phase 2 was you don't have to remember to use it. And then take one of our AI features, Ask AI. I think Ask AI is powerful, but it's not quite where I want it to be something where you don't have to remember to use. So right now, to use Ask AI inside of Superhuman, you have to literally go to it. Or you have to type in a search query, and then instead of hitting enter, you hit down and then enter. So it's kind of the secondary path. The primary path is a traditional keyword search. But there will be a point in time, probably less than a few months away, where we're happy enough with Ask AI from a performance perspective, from a retrieval perspective, from an accuracy perspective, that we're willing to make it the default search experience. And so this is the difference between, again, did you bump into it as a user who didn't ask for that, or were you a user who was specifically asking for it? In your Waymo example, you knew what you were getting into. You launched Waymo, you called the app, you got in, you know it's going to be an adventure. It's going to be a different game when every Uber and every Lyft is a Waymo. And I think we're on that spectrum right now, and we're moving towards that world.
I love it. I'm reminded that when Gmail first launched, it differentiated that it was search was the thing. Your email is now a search thing versus, and you're just taking that to that next logical, or to go back to that 10-year-old seed pitch. What we've always would have wanted to be true, and we were just limited by the technology. So I want to kind of hit the other axes, right? Talking about what's capable, the HCI, but also sort of moving up sort of through SMB, mid-market to enterprise, because in some ways the humans are humans, but the things change so much as you go up the organizational size. What have you sort of experienced as you go do that? How have you had to change?
So much is different, and on the one hand that can be annoying because just because you have product market fit for SMB doesn't mean you have it for mid-market, and then of course, it doesn't mean you have it for the next step up either. But it's also a huge opportunity, because if you're willing to grind and do the work, you can unlock this market that your competitors probably don't have the wherewithal or the patience for. So for example, when it comes to email, there's some obvious stuff, and what was, in retrospect for us, some non-obvious stuff. So the obvious things are going to be security and compliance and mobile device management and integration with Microsoft Intune, which, if you don't know what that is, I had no idea what it was before we started to do this either. And yeah, it's mobile device management. And those are all things you probably expect that you're going to have to do if you're going to sell to a large enterprise. To color that in a little bit more, because again, I didn't know these things existed even more than 2 years ago. Large organizations, our largest customer is 30,000 employees large, they want controls. And they want to be able to say, yeah, you can't copy and paste out of the email app. Or you can copy, but you can only paste into other approved apps. And you can't save attachments into the phone specifically, but you can save attachments into other approved apps. And you can only connect your work email address, but we don't want you to connect your personal email address, at least not in this app. Use a different email app for your personal email address. It's things like that. And there's actually 30 or 40 different, they call keys, that IT administrators need to be able to turn. So that's the obvious stuff. Then there's the non-obvious product stuff. And again, when I say this you'll probably think, well, that should have been obvious. Things that are different to the way that people do email in the enterprise. So they predominantly use Outlook, not Gmail. And if you use Superhuman, you know it's very Gmail oriented. It kind of feels like an amazing Gmail. Now, on the one hand, that's great, because no matter how bad Gmail is, Outlook is just way worse. And so the bar from Outlook to Superhuman is great, which is one of the reasons why enterprises love it. But there are some things that Outlook is really, really good at. There is a reason why it's the 95% market share winner. And one of those things is calendar. It's not pretty to look at, and it's kind of overwrought. But it'll do resource management, it'll book rooms, it will do all the crazy configuration stuff that every single large company needs. And the expectation of any user in an enterprise is that their email app does email and calendar. In fact, they don't think of calendar as a different app in the way that tech people do. So for the first 8-9 years of the company, we were like, cool, use Superhuman for your email. You can keep using Google Calendar or Fantastical or VinCal or Notion Calendar, whatever it is you're doing on the calendar side. But our enterprise customers are like, wait, you want me to use Superhuman for email and stay in Outlook for calendar? That makes no sense. I now have 2 email apps open, and I don't feel like I'm getting value for money, and I just fall back into my old habits of using Outlook. And so there was this moment where I was like, oh shit, we have to build an entirely new startup, which is the calendar startup, to go and serve the enterprise market. But that's one of, in many ways, there's 2 ways to look at this. That can be an oh shit moment, or it can be a a privilege of success, it can be, okay, we have this opportunity, it's really scary, it's going to cost tens of millions of dollars just to build the thing, but if we prosecute the opportunity properly, we don't think anyone else is going to bother, and we're going to have this amazing experience at the end of the day. So that's an example that we just didn't know going into the enterprise that we'd have to do these kinds of things.
I mean, it's so true. As scaled up, it's like you just have to find all of these little, I think, keys the way you described it, but also it's that they're just such an expectation. And then also, maybe speak to this a little bit, but the buyer's journey at the mid-market and the SMB, you're selling to your end user. Like, I want this for me. That is not the world of the enterprise go-to-market motion. And, I mean, I think we learned this between Slack and Teams. Like, if you have an oversized go-to-market motion and a basically substandard product in Teams, you can still win because of that who the economic actor is.
Sad but true. I mean, personally, I like to win on the basis of products, but the more you compete with the big boys, with the Microsofts of the world, the more you're going to go up against a bundle, which is where you need a very good strategy to differentiate.
Cool. Now, just sort of switching gears about the operations of being a CEO and running a team. How has AI changed your day-to-day? Being in the productivity space, I have to imagine your inbox is way better than mine. But also, then kind of follow on, how has that impacted your team? How is your team working on a day-to-day basis now versus how they would have, let's call it 3-4 years ago?
When it comes to email, I actually periodically don't do my email for a week or two, just because I think there is an equivalent for all of us with all of our products. It's necessary to re-experience it as someone who is quote unquote sort of like a normal customer or a normal user. So I come into my email with it very overflowing, and I see how well Superhuman can help improve the situation. And every time I learn new things about how I want to change the product. In terms of how my workday has changed, some of the obvious ways, some less obvious ways. For example, I barely type anymore. I use an app called Flow, or by a company called Whisper, and they have a most amazing dictation technology that works in near real time, and at the same time it's sort of looking at what you're doing on the screen, so that if there are difficult to spell names or unusual words or interesting capitalization, project names, that kind of thing, it's going to capture all of those. And I am legit 2 to 3 times faster at doing my work. Most of my work is like reviewing Figma comments and that kind of thing. And then when it comes to the organization in general, this hopefully won't surprise anyone, but we're obviously all in. I think that the way that we're all going to work is going to change completely, very quickly. It's now part of everyone's performance, like the way we're managing performance at the company, from ICs all the way up to the folks who report to me. Everyone has a KR about this. We've created what we call AI guilds. So every departmental function has a guild, engineering has a guild, where there's leadership for that specific set of people. And they come together to test and try every new tool, synthesize recommendations, and then actually push out implementations of those recommendations into the organization. So these are just some of the things that we're doing to make sure that we become a truly AI native company. And of course, we're applying that bar to everyone that we hire.
Amazing. And I think with that, we're probably at time. I want to thank you for your very insightful perspective on the world, and you truly built a product that people love.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.